Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
Today I talk with Julie Kuehl. Julie, along with Jeff Sire, are my co-hosts on SciTech Talk. I first met Julie about a year and a half ago. I had gotten a Twitter account 2 years ago, and I had been just following people. I thought, maybe I'll interact on Twitter like everyone else does. And I was looking for some people to, to send tweets to, and I was in the Nosilla Castaway chat room at the Nosilla Cast, and Julie was one of the people in there, so I decided to look up her profile, and I saw, oh, hey, she's from North Dakota. North Dakota isn't quite as good as South Dakota, but it's not too bad. So I thought, we'd have enough in common. So we just kind of started tweeting back and forth, and we had the kind of personalities that fit real well. We're both a little snarky, and make comments back and forth to one another. And eventually, we kind of met in a couple podcasts that we were on together, and in a hangout or two, and we got to talking and everything. And a few months ago, she asked, "Hey, do you want to join Jeff and me on the podcast?" I said, sure, it sounds like fun, and it's been an educational and fun experience. I'm glad that they asked me to join them. But now, let's meet Julie Kuehl. Well, we've been gabbing. It sounds like you're yawning. Do you want to, start? We're not going to go real long. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to interrogate you or anything, but there's just a few things about, that I've picked up about you in passing. I just found interesting. I thought, maybe, discuss it a little bit here, but why don't we start out, just, tell people who you are and, a little bit about you.
Okay, I'm Julie Kuehl. Let's see. I live in Minnesota, but I can spit and hit Fargo, North Dakota, so that counts for something, right?
Well, yeah, and this time of year your spit might freeze, but that's
This is true. Matter. There's lots of things that freeze this time of year. Spit's the least of it. Lordy, too much information already. Anyway, let's see. By day, I work for the North Dakota University system as their IT communications specialist. And just recently, I guess I was kind of put in charge of the web team, the web development team, even though I am such a noob at web design and development. But hey, I'm leading the team, which is kind of good. At least I know what the team's doing. Other than that, I've got a long background. Do you really want to go into that? No, we really don't. So, carry on.
Well, like I say, I've discovered a few things about you, and just enough to tantalize me a little bit. Now, you did say something about martial arts and swords. What's that about?
Oh, Lord. The martial arts stories. Okay, how I got started. I had a young son, and, you want to do things with your kids, right? And at like age 4, there's not really much you can do with your kids. Maybe, you can do all kinds of things, take them to the park and playground, whatever. But looked at getting him involved in the YMCA and, did the swimming lesson things and looked around like, oh, look at this. They've got karate classes for kids. Hey, that'd be cool. Signed him up for one session, watched him through the window, tried to help him at home and went, dang nabbit, I need to sign up for this myself so I can help him. A few short years later, I'm like a 5th-degree black belt running the place, and traveling to Japan to give demonstrations at police stations. Oh, well, that's a whole nother story. But, I kind of got involved in that, and the particular place, dojo it's called, that we were studying was affiliated with the YMCA, but it had lots of different martial arts. Anybody who's familiar with martial arts knows that can encompass a lot. We were essentially karate oriented, but we did everything from aikido to jiu-jitsu to tai chi to I could go on and on. Kobudo. My favorite was iaido, which is sword play, and man, do I long for those days. There was just something about a sword that's elegant in my world, I guess. So, had a lot of fun, traveled around the country a little bit with that, and taught all kinds of really good kids. Was in charge of a demo team for a number of years. We would do like performances at the halftime of basketball games and such. We would also go out. I would teach self-defense classes. And that was interesting. What I always found interesting, those was the variety of people that were interested in taking them, but also the people who were willing to pay for them. Like businesses and in dorms. It was interesting that the different variety of people. I remember one time we were teaching, for lack of a better term, the better term would be meter readers for like the gas companies and electric companies. It's like, wow, I never thought of the utilities as being a customer for self-defense, but yeah, they were.
Well, when you got somebody kind of like stalking outside your apartment, sneaking around reading meters or around somebody's house, I guess they could be mistaken for a stalker or somebody, but...
Yeah, and the fact that they basically have to, work independently. One person, they're not out as teams. It's one person walking, like you say, through people's backyards, dark, the darkest corner of my yard is where the meters are. It's the most neglected corner of most people's yards, probably. So, I can see where they were coming from. I just would have never thought of it ahead of time.
Well, yeah, I picked that little piece of information up from you somewhere, and like I said, I'm kind of picturing the sword, and I can see how that could be kind of a graceful kind of activity where there would be, because I'm kind of fascinated by motion, and I find dance kind of interesting, and just to be able to move yourself and the sword through space and just make a dance out of it. I'm just kind of intrigued by that idea.
There is a lot of similarity between dance and the martial arts. Matter of fact, if you're familiar, especially with the original Karate Kid movies, there was in those some evidence of the crossover between the two. And the elegance it's part of what appeals to me about the sword is the tradition and I suppose you'd call it ritual that goes along with it. Because you are, handling a dangerous, potentially lethal weapon, you got to have rules and regulations and etiquette and procedures and, those types of things to make sure nobody's getting hurt. So the whole, structure and ritual, I think that goes around that was intriguing to me. And I learned so much of, essentially the Japanese culture through my time with the martial arts. I actually, I spent some time visiting Japan a couple of times. I learned a bit of the language. I can recognize and almost read, although it's getting weaker every day. Japanese has 3 different alphabets, if you want to call them that, the hiragana, katakana, and kanji. I was pretty good at hiragana, pretty decent at katakana. I had a few kanji down, the ones that you needed. So there's like thousands of those. Those are the actual Chinese characters. So those are all basically done by memory, not phonics. So they take a lot more time. But it was interesting because one time when I went to Japan, it was actually on a business trip, not related to karate. And I wound up being both times I was in Japan, I was the most fluent in Japanese. And it's amazing how just getting around on the subway system there, being able to tell one character from another. To know that you were supposed to get off at the one stop that had a character that looked like this. You don't know what the character is. You don't know how to pronounce it. You don't know what it means, but you know what it looks like, and you know that's the one you got to get off on. And some people I was traveling with just couldn't even. They would just look at it and go, "I don't know what that says. It's just blah blah blah." I'm like, well, no. If you look at it, it's got these many strokes, and it looks like a square or it looks like a T or something. And they're like, no, it's just I don't get it. So being able to discern one from another wound up being quite handy.
Well, yeah, because on this podcast before I talked to Scott Wilsey about when he spent like 8 years in Japan from about 8 to 16, and about his different experiences there about traveling on the subway. He said he picked up some of the language, just enough, kind of like probably pidgin type stuff, just enough to communicate. And he said he knew some of the writing, but not a lot of it. But he just talking to him, I found it kind of interesting about Japan and the way they live, and just how crowded the country is, because from us for the Midwest, where we got lots of open space, to go to a country like that where everything is packed tight and everyone is. He said one thing about, because I listened to some of his audio Gaijin podcast that he's reposted online, talking about living there, and he said the Japanese people talk really soft because it's such a small country and everything is so close together that they talk softly so their voice don't carry. And then when Americans go over there, we talk loud and big, and it almost seems kind of rude to the Japanese that we're talking so loud, but it's just not the kind of thing that we're used to.
Yeah, no, from a truly Japanese perspective, Americans are immensely rude between the way they talk, the amount of space that they take up. We just sit big. We, put your elbows out and set your purse next to you, whereas a Japanese person will, do their best to take up the least amount of space possible and whatever. There's so many stories I could tell here. One of which was you talk about the space. In all of my dealings with martial arts in Japan, we actually had a Japanese teacher's assistant staying with us. She wasn't exactly an exchange student, but she was working with the school and just looking for, host families to stay at. So we gave her one of the kids' bedrooms for 6 months. And at the end of that 6 months, and you might remember this, Mike, being from the somewhat local area, this would have been the winter of 96, 97, and the flood of 97.
Please, I have nightmares about that. That's when we quit farming.
Worst winter in recorded history up in this part of the country to a large extent. And we literally had a blizzard every week. I've never, and I doubt we'll ever see, at least knock on wood, quick. We literally had schools and businesses and interstates and, everything shut down once a week for 3 months. I mean, literally, you'd miss a day or two of school every week for almost 3 months. And then we went through the flood of 97, which was a record flood here at the time. And then I mentioned I'm close to Fargo, North Dakota. Well, roughly 100 miles north of here is a place called Grand Forks, North Dakota, which in the flood of 97, the downtown area caught on fire. And it was, lead story on CNN, which is also displayed in Japan, at which point this girl's parents saw it on TV and called to make sure she was okay. Small world. She actually did help us sandbag. We got her out and we, showed her one of the sandbagging spiders where you fill it up, take the bags and fill them with sand, tie it up. So we put her to work. But after we finished that little experience, we ended with the very first part of June driving to a Boy Scout high adventure camp in Cimarron, New Mexico, known as Philmont. And to get between Fargo and Philmont, you pass through, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, a lot of nothing. And she thought she was from a rural part of Japan. It was 60 miles west of Tokyo. She didn't quite understand why when we got to Rapid City, Mount Rushmore, the Black Hills area, why we would pick up, a 24-pack of water, some bologna, some bread, these other things, because there's no fast food for 400 miles. Breaks down, we are just, we keep an eye on the windmills, because where windmills are, there's water troughs, and where there's water troughs, there's water, and when there's water, there's cattle. Where there's cattle, there's ranchers. So keep an eye out for windmills.
Because once you get past the Black Hills, you're in the tumbleweed country out there. And that was one of the things that, just growing up here on the plains, you learned about before you go out in the wintertime. Make sure you got your winter survival kit in your car, a shovel, a flashlight, and make sure your cell phone is charged. Yep. There are things that we do here that I think other people kind of take for granted, that you make sure that you are prepared for the weather, because it can change up here. Even in the summertime, you keep an eye on the clouds, because tornadoes can pop up pretty quick, and you want to be prepared to just hit the decks and run for cover.
Yeah, and most people by now know I also ride a motorcycle, and that is the one thing people from other parts of the country will often talk about how boring it is to, drive through the plains. And I have become a creature of the plains where I think it's completely claustrophobic to drive through trees. I love doing it. I love the trees. I love the break. But one thing about the plains is you can see the weather coming, 3 or 4 hours in advance. And on a motorcycle, that means you can choose to ride around the storm, or at the very least, as you're riding, if you know North Dakota, you got nowhere to hide. So if you see something coming, you find yourself an overpass, and you just hunker down in the overpass, because if you wait until you get clipped by the storm, it could be half an hour maybe to the next overpass, which means like the next form of shelter of any kind. If you caught out in a hailstorm or tornadoes, you're not supposed to hunker down on overpasses, but it's usually the hail that's the worst of it. So, yeah, being able to see things coming is, to me, I'm so used to it, I get nervous if I can't.
Well, yeah, because, like I say, I grew up on a farm, and where our farm set was right on the edge of the James River Valley. So, I mean, we could look 40, 50. I never could figure out how far we could look to the west there. So we could see way out there. We could see the storm approaching. And my wife, who grew up in Watertown, which isn't, by most people's standards, isn't that big a town. It's like, I think, 12,000 people. But, I mean, she grew up in the city. And when she moved out there to the farm, thunderstorms never bothered her that much, but once she got out there and could see these things coming, and the size and the scale and the immensity and the color and the darkness and the way the stuff was rolling, she would freak out. And she's kind of gotten to the point where she calms down a little bit more now, but still, just that from a city to the country like that, the weather just kind of freaked her out.
Yeah, the immensity of it, the scale of a thunderstorm is pretty insane. Here's another thing that I'm a ham radio operator. And it was interesting how I got into that is because I was also a volunteer with Boy Scouts at a very large Boy Scout gathering a few years back. And at this very large Boy Scout gathering, we had a tornado essentially directly overhead forming, funnel clouds dropping down and teasing us and whatever. So we were, hunkering down and taking shelter and all of that stuff. And the only people who really know what was going on was the people who had ham radios. It's like, dang it, I want a ham radio. So about 6 months later, I went through and got my licenses. Actually, I guess I got a general technician first and then general. And no, Morse code is not required these days. So those of you who are interested, go get it, because once you have it, you only have to renew it once every 10 years. And if you renew it, you can keep it for life. As soon as I got my ham radio license, all of a sudden my friends that had kind of gotten me into it said, "Oh, you got to come out and be a storm spotter with us." And I'm like, "Really?" And I'm like, "I just got this ham radio license so I could listen in to you guys and help you guys do what you're doing at these things." Like, no, you need to come out. So the next thing I know, I'm finding myself out chasing tornadoes. And going, wait a minute, how did I get into this? I haven't done it lately in the last few years, but that's a hoot too. You do learn some things and how to stay safe, I guess, around tornadoes and weather like that as well.
Well, and when you mention storm chasers, every time I think of that, I think of the movie Twister, where they're driving down the road, and what's the line? What is it? They say, "We have cows." The cows are flying through the air because of the tornado, and I always think of that. I've never seen a cow fly. We've never had a tornado touch down on our farm. There was some, north of Clark here that did major damage, but we never had any problems out there. So I've never firsthand seen the damage a tornado can do. But, I take those things with a great deal of respect.
Oh, yeah. And, I was amazed. I was listening to somebody, a weather service employee out of Minneapolis, talk about his 30 years with the service there, and he's never once seen a tornado. And I'm like, really? Because I can go out on the second weekend in June, standing west of town, and look to the southeast or southwest a little bit, and there it is. I mean, it's like right on. I mean, I see a tornado every summer.
I don't see them that often, but about 30 years ago, we had some major tornadoes go through north of Clark, and we were living about 12 miles south of Clark. And I remember that day, I think it was in June, it was in the afternoon, my wife and I were home, and we were outside, and it was sunny where we were at, but we were looking to the kind of the northeast towards Clark, or a little to the east of Clark, and we saw these clouds, and my wife goes, well, that's got to be tornadoes there. I said, nah, it can't be. And then we went in the house, and we had the TV on when we walked outside. When we came back in, the tornado warning was blaring on the TV, and they were saying, Clark's getting hit by tornadoes. We went out there and looked at it again and went, oh yeah, because then we could see like three tails coming down, and and that did quite a bit of damage. It destroyed several houses. I remember one house right along the side of the highway. It just ripped the side off like a dollhouse. You could see all the stuff in there, and that was the closest I've come to actual tornado, seeing in person tornado damage, and you take that kind of stuff seriously.
Yeah, tornadoes are nothing to mess with. I mean, as much as I'm kind of talking light about them because I have seen them, but I've lived with them, pretty much all my life, and they're just it's like snow in the winter. You get tornadoes in the summer, and you don't fret over it. You shovel the snow when it falls, and you drive slower in the wintertime. And when tornadoes come, I have a bad habit of popping my nose outside to see what's going on, and then I run into for cover. And I have to admit, there's been times when there's been some storms run through town. Even one last summer, or was it the summer before? Honest to God, I thought it was going to rip the roof off the house. But there are things that you do to stay safe in those situations. So once you've got that routine down, you do what you can, and then after that, there's nothing more that can be done. So
Right. Well, because even out on the farm, we had a trailer house that was behind my mom's house where my wife and I and the kids lived. And anytime the weather looked like, especially in the middle of the night, if it looked like it was even going to get halfway serious, we packed up the kids, we went over the moms, we put them on the sofa sleeper because they could stand that thing. I'd sleep on the floor because that was more comfortable. But then we just camp out there because, rule number one, never be in a trailer house for a tornado.
never outside is safer.
Yeah, those things were, I always called them like a Dutch oven because they got hot in the summertime. And, they were just death traps. So we'd just get the heck out of there. And so there'd be lots of night. And then for a while there, we was having storms quite often. So we spent a lot of nights sleeping over the moms. So, thankfully I was farming at the time. So if I got up in the morning, it was kind of, grumpy and blurry-eyed. I wasn't taking out anybody else I had to work with. But, it did get to be kind of just stressful after a while.
Yeah, it's well, it's part of the life on the plains. It is what it is. And actually, is it North Dakota or is it the Red River Valley? It has more. They refer to Tornado Alley as being through, Oklahoma down there. And actually, up here we have more tornadoes than they do down there, on average. So, yeah. We never get credit for anything.
No, we're just we're flyover country here. This is what people fly over when they go from the East Coast to the West Coast. So
I know. We like it that way, right?
Yeah, but there's certain things. One of the things is like Sturgis, that draws a lot of people in, and I do know you did mention you ride a motorcycle. And I know there are women that ride motorcycles, but it's nothing I've seen a lot of. How did you get into that, and what has been your experience riding motorcycles?
God, I wish I had a good story for this. I have no idea why I do this. I have not been riding motorcycles all my life, although I did ride. I finally figured out they were called mini bikes back then. I kept calling pocket rockets, like the little bikes they have nowadays, but that wasn't it. But they were mini bikes way back when. And back in high school, early college days, I would ride guys, ride on the back with guys. So I had that experience as well. But basically hadn't seen, touched, looked at a motorcycle in decades. And every day coming home from work, I would ride down a particular street, a main street through town, and frequently, almost daily, there would be this lady on a white Harley Sportster riding next to me. Just a petite, just a average mom-looking lady, not biker chick, not T-Mobile racer crotch rocket. I mean, just this lady riding this bike. And I'm like, and every time I'd look over, I'd go, dang, that looks like fun. Dang, if she can do it, I can do it. Dang, why am I not doing this? Dang. And I have to admit, the one thing it took, because I have no experience with motorcycles, I don't know anybody that rides a motorcycle that I could really ask questions of or anything. It took me an eternity to work up the courage to actually walk into a dealership. But when I finally did, I was nervous as hell, scared, and I was almost shocked because, and it was a Harley dealership too. I guess I knew from day one, especially after seeing that lady on the ride home every day, I wanted a Harley. If I'm going to ride a motorcycle, dang it, I was going to ride a Harley. And I walked into the Harley dealership, and Harley, I think it might even be a company practice, intentional, that they've got a woman at the front door. That nearby, they're usually in charge of the clothing department, the apparels, and they're usually close to the front door, so they greet you and, do their best to put you at ease, and they can recognize, nervous people when they come in, that kind of stuff. And they make the guys feel good too. It's not just for us ladies that walk in the door. So they have a friendly face as you come in the door. And I got a chance to walk around and look around. And I don't know if I talked to anybody that day, or maybe I did actually. And they were all pretty nice and helpful and gave me some good information. And back then, I was traveling for work on a very regular basis between Fargo and Bismarck. So that's 200 miles, and halfway is Jamestown. And there's a Harley dealership there. So, I was tired and needed to fill up with gas. I'd stop over at the Harley shop and just check in. And finally, one day, I walked in, and there was a bike by the front door. It says, don't care. I'm just going to do it. That one will be fine. It's not the color I want. It's not the size I want. It's not, and it's like, but it'll do. I'll take it. So I think I bought it it was either March or April, but it was too soon to ride it. It was too cold out and whatever. And again, this dealership's 100 miles from home. And they said, no problem. We have, trailers going into Fargo all the time. We'll just bring it into town for you one day. And I was waiting and the weather's getting nice and, after winter and knowing you've got a motorcycle and, late by basically, and it's like, okay, I really want my motorcycle. And they weren't bringing it. I'm like, fine, I'm going to go out and get it. So I had my oldest son give me a ride out there, and I had taken the training course on a little tiny motorcycle, and fell and, crashed the bike in training. Yay, me. But learned from that. And knew what I needed to know to be comfortable on a bike, and knew that I was not ready for a 100-mile ride, because when you buy a new motorcycle, you kind of have to break in the engine a little bit. So you've got some very specific instructions you need to follow. It's like, I'm not ready for following specific instructions when I'm trying to learn to ride. So I'm like, okay, you guys break in. You guys put the first 50 miles on the bike for me, and then bring it to Fargo, and I'll ride it around parking lots for a little while, get used to it, whatever. No. So now I'm out there, and they're like, okay, there you go. There's your big old bike. It's like, it's huge. And it's the smallest bike Harley makes. And it's like, oh my God, this thing is huge. So I spent 10 minutes, through in their parking lot, and then drove around the corner and found another parking lot, and probably spent another 20 minutes over there. And it's like, okay, I got to get home. Here we go. So I hit the open road and took a back road with very little traffic and a heck of a lot of scenery. In other words, the perfect motorcycle road. And took probably 4 hours to get home that 100 miles. Part of it was I stopped along the way. Part of it was I was going kind of slow to take it easy on the brand new engine. And part of it was I was just having fun taking in the view. So anybody who'd get up behind me would just pass me. It's like, bye, I'm having fun. How about you? But I actually broke a tooth on that ride home too. I have no idea how I broke a tooth, but I somehow broke, probably from, clenching my jaws of nerves. But I got it home, and I swear to God, that was the best thing ever, because it forced me to get out on the road and ride that thing as opposed to putz around in a parking lot for a little while. You see so many motorcycles, Sportsters especially, available in the used bike market with, I don't know, 500 miles on them. It's like, okay, you bought this thing, you rode it in the parking lots, and you decided it wasn't for you. That's fine, but I also don't think you gave it a shot. With 500 miles on the bike, you didn't get out of the parking lot. For me, I really do think that 100 miles on a back road with no traffic was the best thing ever. And I've been riding it ever since. And actually, a year after I bought my motorcycle, I sold my car. And I have only the motorcycle at this point. Not necessarily by choice, but it was a choice to keep one or the other, and the motorcycle stayed and the car went. So that was a leap, and so far so good. I guess it's working out. Got some things I need to do to my motorcycle to make it more comfortable for me, but she's my baby.
Well, I know several people and one of the guys I work with, I know a lot of people who ride motorcycles, and I've, never gotten into it. I know they enjoy themselves. I just don't know that I would like to go, ride on one. I kind of like four wheels, a cab, and, radio and that stuff. But, for somebody that does like the wind in their face and, the open road, and I can see the appeal of it.
Yeah, and it's such a different experience, I guess. If you with a car, I don't care if it's gorgeous out. With a car, you just get in the car and you go where you need to go. You don't think about it. You don't plan ahead. You don't consider what route to take. You just go. With a motorcycle, at least for myself, I find that it's never that easy. You always, first off, have to gear up. You don't just jump on the bike. I don't just jump on my bike. Some people do. But, I've always got boots on. I've always got my jacket. I've always got gloves. I've always got glasses. Okay, I occasionally have a helmet, but that's another story. My helmet doesn't fit right. I'd wear it more often if it didn't hurt. But it's, you never can just, go, I think I'm going to run to the grocery store. It's always, okay, I got to run to the grocery store. Okay, I got to put all my gear on, and then I have to get these groceries home. So I can only buy so many groceries, and then I have to bring a bag along or a backpack to carry them home. So which backpack am I going to use, and what's the weather out? Because if it's raining, we need to go, So it's never as easy as it is with a car. But once you get hooked, especially... One of my favorite rides is between here and Sturgis. There's parts of the Dakotas that are still, they look a heck of a lot like Dances with Wolves, including the buffalo. And you get in some of those back roads on a gorgeous day with nobody around to either, slow you down or speed you up. You can go however you want to go. And it's a Zen-like experience, I suppose I could say.
Yeah, see, when I travel, I'm one of those people. Well, first of all, I'm lazy. I don't want to have to do that much planning. Like I say, I'm one of those people get in, go, and take off. And I don't know. For me, traveling's not zen. Part of the problem is traveling for me is staying awake to get to the end. Falling asleep while you're driving tends to scare your passengers a lot.
Somebody who said that they would fall asleep riding their motorcycle, and he said I had to give it up. I'm like, thank you, God, I'd hope so.
Yeah, because that would be like death. I mean, at least if I fall asleep in my car, there's a chance I might survive. But yeah, and I have heard of that, and I'm going, whoa, that's kind of serious. And yeah, maybe you should consider giving it up. But I'm for, when we talk on our podcast, Sci-Fi Tech Talk, we keep talking about what thing would we like to have. I want a transporter. I want to instantly go from one point to the other point. For me, traveling isn't, maybe if somebody else is driving, I could just sit back and, enjoy the view, but that doesn't get to happen very often. So I just want to be able to get zapped from one point to the other and just, be done with it. I'm not a traveler, I guess.
Yeah, and that's I guess I've done both on the motorcycle. I've had, I used to use it to commute back and forth to grad school, which was up in Grand Forks, which is 100 miles away. So there you had a deadline. You had to go regardless of the weather, off you go. You had to be there on time. Okay, the ride home could be more leisurely, but, that whole business of having a definite deadline. But most of the time when I'm traveling by motorcycle, it's, I got to get to Sturgis. Sturgis lasts a week. Okay, I'll make it. It's only 500 miles. I can make 500 miles in a week. So, it's if it's I'm not. I suppose you could call me a fair weather rider because I don't particularly like to ride in the cold I do ride in the cold. Oh God, do I ride in the cold though? I don't particularly like to ride in the rain, and I'm not real keen on riding at night, and that's probably more because I have crappy glasses than anything else. They make it difficult to see with the glare and stuff, but. It's one of those things. It's like camping. There was a time in my life where I thought that I needed to prove something, perhaps, so that you would camp out at below zero weather, or you would camp out, or go on long backpacking trips and whatever. And it's like, yeah, I can still do that. I know how. It doesn't bother me, but I don't have to. I can choose. And if we're camping and it's cold, wet, and miserable, I can choose to leave. I don't have to stick it out. And that's kind of the way I feel like motorcycle riding too. I can choose to, ride in the rain, or I can choose to sit it out, or I can choose to turn around, go home, or I can choose to not take the motorcycle at all. Having that, using the motorcycle for things that you don't have to go and you don't have to be there, at a certain time or day, makes it a lot easier.
It sounds like all these things you do are kind of like character building exercises.
Worked out because I'm quite the character at this point.
Well, that I kind of know too. But yeah, it just seems like the martial arts and the motorcycles. It's just something that you kind of do to maybe kind of push yourself a little bit and just learn new stuff and new abilities and just learn things.
Yeah, I suppose I'm certainly one for learning things. As a matter of fact, anybody who's been following me on Twitter will have witnessed the rants I was having this fall. I was actually enrolled in college again for the 25th year in a row or something. But that experience did not go well, and so I am not continuing. And so I'm finding myself here with this break between Christmas and New Year's going, okay, now what? So the idea of having, nothing to learn, nothing to challenge, nothing to, push it a little bit. It's like, okay, this has got to end. I got to find something. So
most people would find that relaxing, but apparently you need to be doing things.
Well, I need to have something. Yeah, I'm not a horrible OCD pace, clean the house because there's nothing better to do type of person. Because I can be, oh boy, you haven't seen my house, huh? But there's got to be some sort of purpose, I guess you could say, some goal that we're going for.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about was, I know that you've done some writing for the Mac Observer and that kind of stuff. How did you kind of get into that, and how has your experience been doing that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out why at this point in my life I seem to find myself making a living by writing. How did this happen? I don't know. I had been writing for the Mac Observer for a little over a year now, and I guess that got started just because story time, you asked. I've been a Mac user for, it will be 7 years this spring. A few years ago, I was a director of an organization and had a board of directors that I reported to. And one of the people on my board was the most nerdy, Luddite, I'm kind of stretching it a little bit. Think about your absent-minded professor type, just kind of off in their own little world. And at this board of directors meetings, he was playing with, at that time, a video iPod. And at that time, iPods had a rap of, they're just, music things for teenagers. And here's the most unteenagery guy playing with this video iPod, and I'm like, what on earth? And so he started showing me what he was doing with it, and he was using it for some of his college. So he was traveling between the States and Europe, and he would use it for those long flights, and he would take resources with him to use when he was in Europe teaching. And I'm like, huh? So literally the next day, I was the college I worked at, the bookstore had an Apple section. They were an Apple reseller. So I went down there and I walked by and I saw a MacBook with GarageBand on it and the iPods. And I believe I bought the iPod first. I think I bought it for work, actually, claimed it was, research into new technologies or something, and got to playing with that a little bit. And within, 2 or 3 months of that, 2 months of that meeting, and playing with GarageBand in the bookstore, I went and bought my first MacBook, a black one, if you remember those. And literally I got home at like 6:30 that night, set it on the kitchen table, having never used a Mac before. Nah, that's not true, because I used Macs way back in the early days, when the original Macintosh came out. But I never owned one, and I never had one as my primary machine. So I had this MacBook on my kitchen table, 6:30 at night, and by 8 o'clock I had a podcast up live on the internet. 90 minutes it took me to figure out the operating system, figure out GarageBand, and put together a podcast, which says more about the Mac than it does about me. So eventually, again, the podcast was kind of my entree into that, because we were into training at that time, and so we could see the value of podcasts for training. And I eventually wound up at the New Media Expo, a conference that was held in Vegas at that time, back in 2008, and everybody there said, "Oh, you also have to go to Macworld." So then I found myself at Macworld in 2009, and I've been going back ever since. And just the community at Macworld, and which extends to the online world as well. I keep in touch with all those people on a daily basis through Twitter and Google Plus and all the other social networks that have come and gone in between, and just found myself. The Mac Observer was looking for writers, and I was looking for work, and bingo, that was all it took. So I've enjoyed doing that. Man, writing news is a little different. I really hadn't had much experience writing news before that, so that was kind of a new thing to learn. So that was. It's still something I have to learn to get better at, I guess. So, and should we break some news here? Because I really haven't told anybody before this, but I just recently signed on with the mymac.com folks to start writing some reviews and other things for them as well. So, yay.
And I've seen they've been advertising. I've been considering it. I just don't know if I'm ready to take that leap yet. But I have thought about that one too, and it would be kind of fun to do that, because I've done a couple reviews on the NosillaCast, and it's kind of fun. And it is one of those things that once you start doing it, does kind of get under your skin, and you do kind of want to do more. So.
Yeah, and I find it's kind of like a muscle. I want to keep exercising. The work I do, my day job requires writing. I have to admit there are days when I consider myself a spin doctor. It's like, okay, fine. What is it you're trying to say? Sure, we can make it sound like that. Whereas with the Mac community and the reviews and whatever, you get a lot more chance to be a person. You get to have a personality. You get to, call it like you see it, that kind of thing. So it just feels a little more personal, less corporate when I'm writing for some of the Mac blogs that I have over the years.
Well, and I'm thinking that you and I are kind of the same. That the reason we do podcasts and the reason we do this other stuff is because we like to communicate. We like to get ideas out there. We like to express ourselves, and this just seems like a natural extension just to to be able to write and get your thoughts out there, and have other people comment on them, or feel like you've said something that's possibly important, or whatever. And I think it's just something that kind of drives a person to do these things.
Well, here's my excuse for doing podcasts and even for blogs too. If I didn't podcast, I swear to God, I wouldn't talk to anybody but bus drivers all week. So, I don't get a lot of chance to interact with people in my job, and it just the idea of having an excuse on a regular basis to talk with people about a specific topic and carry on. And same with writing. I get to write about things I'm actually interested in, as opposed to the latest email back end structure or something, which I find interesting, but it's not like writing about a new piece of Mac software, an app for your iPhone. That's just kind of fun. So yeah, it's a nice little outlet.
Well, I like to talk, and sometimes my wife tells me that, shut up, and so I can do podcasts, and nobody's telling me to shut up yet. So I figure, it must be okay, and people want to hear it, But it is just kind of nice, because I do talk to the kids at school when I'm cleaning up there, and sometimes they, as part of an assignment, they'll ask me questions or something like that, and they'll say, what's the most important thing that if you were to tell me what's the most important thing you could learn in school, and I say, if you learn nothing else, and I hope you learn more than that, but if you only learned one thing in school, learn how to communicate and how to be able to express your ideas, to tell a story, and just to be able to get the thoughts out of your head and tell another person. Because this country was founded by people. Some were well educated, but others were just, they had an idea and they had a vision, they had a desire, and they wanted to be able to communicate it to other people. And that's kind of what throughout this country's history, it's been those kind of people that have kind of led people and created companies, created all these things that we now have. And I said, just kind of be passionate and just be able to communicate what's inside your head and try to inspire other people, because sometimes people just need to be inspired. And and that's one of the, I think, greatest things that a person can do, is just be able to communicate what they feel.
Yeah, there's some truth to that, because I don't care what field you go into. I don't care what field you go into. You're going to have to communicate with other people. I mean, if you want to get paid, even if you don't get paid, you still have to communicate. You ought to see the forms that are required if you choose not to get paid. You're still going to have to communicate with other people. So doing so effectively is critical. I mean, I'm thinking about a incident that happened not too long ago with a car breakdown. And I still, to this day, I took auto shop in high school along with other wacky things like aviation, electronics, and wood shop. But the things that I learned through those classes were basically how to speak the language. I mean, I know how cars operate in general. I mean, can I fix my car? No. But do I know what pistons and connecting rods and valves and camshafts and all that stuff are? Yes. So, being able to translate and put things into a form that who we are trying to talk to or communicate with can understand. It's not about you, it's about them. That is my day job. I mean, literally, I translate between the tech nerds and the users. And so it's always about, okay, the person receiving this message, what do they care about? How do they understand it? They don't need to know your technical difficulties on the back end. All they have to do is change their password twice. Okay, that's it. That's all we have to communicate. They don't care that you have to sync up your, directories and your servers and all the other technical issues that go on the back end. All they know is that when they log on this date, they have to change their password. That's easy enough. So, yeah, that, again, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you can, put your thoughts together and understand the other person's perspective, you're going to go far.
Well, what I've always kind of said is, people say knowledge is power, but sometimes I think knowledge protects you from power. Sometimes the more you know, the less you can be, deceived. Because, like if you use the mechanic metaphor that you were using, if you were to go in there and he says, yeah, we got to rotate your thingamajiggy there, you can call him on the BS and say, I know better than that, because, just so they don't try and pull one over on you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, they don't get too far. And it's part of it is, and I'm horrible at some forms of communication. I am not a good debater, because I just really, that's not a form I've studied or practiced much. So I'm really horrible with logic, picking apart people's logic. I should practice that more. But there's the challenge for the next semester or whatever you want to call it. But being able to recognize when people are spinning, putting the spin on things is a skill in and of itself. It's like driving around with a cab driver in a strange city. At some point, even if it's a strange city you've never been to before, you still know you're going around in circles and you're getting, scammed. If you're familiar with the city, you know sooner. If you're not familiar with the city, it might take you a little longer, but even eventually, you still know you're getting scammed.
And you see things like spin, propaganda, all that stuff fascinates me. That's why I can't stand to watch news anymore, because the talking heads will be up there saying stuff, and I'm cutting their arguments to bits because I look through what they're saying and look at what they're actually trying to tell people, and it's gotten to the point where I can't stand this anymore. So I kind of make it a point to not watch news very often because it just drives me bonkers.
I'm with you too, but what I find fun in news is picking it apart. I don't watch the news, period. But when I did, you would watch the news for how they were spinning it rather than the content of the actual news. It was like, okay, this is what are they saying? It's more of how are they saying it than what were they saying. I guess I found that we talked about the flood in 97. The flood in 97 came up here and CNN came and covered that. We had two things going on in Fargo that year. One was the release of the movie Fargo. Sweet. So CNN was in town to cover that one. And then we had the flood of 97 and CNN came back to town to cover that. And being on the front lines of the flood, throwing the sandbags, walking dikes, doing whatever, and then to go home and watch the coverage on the news, it's like, you're so full of shit. Anyway, but it's, that right there was when I knew it before then, but I had a very clear exercise in a personal experience with what actually happened and how it was presented, and the facts versus the way it was presented.
Well,
yeah.
In one situation like that hit this part of the country, I forget, it was like, I want to say 10, 15 years ago, this report came out that said Clark County, where I live here, was one of the sixth hungriest counties in the nation. I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of people with Dunlap's disease, belly hanging over the belt. And I'm going, we don't look that hungry. Well, come to find out what the thing was, what they had looked at, the income, the average income for the county. Well, this is a farming community, and farmers don't get rich, so their income is rather low. So we're looking at that going, well, they have low income, but they're not accessing, food stamp and social programs like they should. So therefore, they must be starving. Well, the thing is, again, this is a farming community. They raise their own vegetables. They butcher their own beef. They raise their own food. Neighbors will help neighbors. There's, still a sense of community here. So if you see somebody who needs something, you help them out. And that didn't compute with these people. They just thought, well, based on what their beliefs and what they were thinking, we must be starving. Well, we called BS on that one.
Yeah, and I've got a background in statistics as well, and so there's a big difference between, what the numbers, not a big difference. Any given set of data can be presented almost an infinite number of ways, and it's your choice. And what you choose, how you choose to present that information tells a lot about, the point you're trying to make.
Well, or to quote Mark Twain, figures never lie and liars always figure, so.
Yeah, my dad would always paraphrase that as figures lie. What did he say? He had some twist on that. Figures lie and liars figure, and I figure liars. I can't remember. He had a fun, longer version of that.
And I could kind of see how something like one of those going, because it's that kind of stuff that just drives a person crazy.
Yeah, it is what it is, and I guess the skill for the 21st century is to be able to recognize it, identify it, and put it in its place.
Well, I think hitting that point there. I found out a lot about you because going into here, I knew just enough, but I found out more, and this has been rather interesting. I hope that the listeners find this interesting too, because I know you've got people out there, you got fans and everything, and Okay, followers at least, and I think they might find this interesting too, and so I thank you for being on and taking your time and putting up with me, and we'll get together on Sci-Fi Tech Talk and we'll do some more talking there. But this has been kind of fun.
Sounds good. And yeah, I wasn't quite sure where we were going to go with this, but we covered a lot of ground, to be honest. So it was fun.
Yeah, and you're an easy interview. All I got to do is drop a quarter and you give you a couple questions. You can go for quite a bit there because.
And I didn't even have a beer, so hey.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you'd like to hear more of Julie and me talking, come over to Sci-Fi Tech Talk and listen to us talk about different works of science fiction, the tech involved with them, and how they kind of relate to the real world. I hope you'll come and join us. Thank you.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter at BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.